It is my nerd world, and I'm glad you're with this bonus episode, a Star Wars podcast and a Star Wars show. I am your host, Jon Justice, and My Nerd World is brought to you by mynerdworld.net and the Bourbon Pursuit podcast. Subscribe and follow Bourbon Pursuit wherever you go and get your podcast. If you think you like bourbon, get ready to love bourbon, and you can take yourself from a bourbon novice to a bourbon baron with Bourbon Pursuit. Look, really excited to sit down and share with you my initial thoughts on episode 1 of the book of Boba Fett. Right? It seems like we haven't had any new Star Wars in a while, and I know that's not true. Right? The Bad Batch was fantastic, but it's been over a year now since the season finale, that epic season finale of The Mandalorian. And so to get more live action, right, we've all been clamoring for it. We've all been waiting for it. We've seen this sparse, in terms of content, right, the sparse, even though we've got a ton of them, spots that Disney Plus and Lucasfilm had run. But we finally got a chance to watch episode 1 of the Book of Boba Fett, and I'm here to share my initial thoughts ahead of the big show coming up on Saturday this weekend. So hopefully you've watched the episode, because I'm going to get into some spoilers here. And I want to know what you think as well. So if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to obviously like and subscribe, but also go and leave a comment down in the YouTube page, and I'll share it. Share your thoughts on the next episode. And you can find the podcast, My Nerd World, wherever you go and listen to podcasts as well. But I want to hear from you, so leave a comment on YouTube or email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. And what I want to start off with at first is kind of the difference between the casual fan and the hardcore fans, and who this is really playing for. Because I know for me personally, I tend to examine and look back on these initial episodes from a different viewpoint of what Disney and Lucasfilm and the creators may have been going for, right? The hardcore of the hardcores are kind of in the minority. They want this show to go and appeal for everybody. So we're talking casual fan versus hardcore fan. Now, what's really interesting to me is that I've got a friend of mine, okay? His name is Commie Bob. He used to, I call him Commie Bob because he dresses like a communist. He has a very distinct style. Great guy, but he has a very distinct style. But it was very sort of Stalin-esque at the time. He used to be a producer on the TV portion of the radio show that I did back in Tucson. And as a matter of fact, on the YouTube channel, you can see past funny clips from that television portion from that show. And actually, Commie Bob's in there. He's a Star Wars fan, but I would put him more in the casual Star Wars category. I don't think that he's big on listening to podcasts or rewatching things over and over again. He's probably a bump up from a total casual fan, right? But he is a big Boba Fett fan. So just to give you kind of a gauge of what a casual fan has to say. Now, he almost only exclusively messages me stuff about Star Wars because he knows what a huge fan I am. But he messaged me this morning. I got this at 9:37. He lives in Tucson, Arizona. I'm here in Minneapolis. And it was a Book of Fett. And it was BOOOOK, capital letters, Fett, with about 5 exclamation points, all caps. I can die a happy man. So, Commie Bob was clearly very excited about the Book of Boba Fett. So, what are my thoughts on it? Well, my thoughts are that I enjoyed it. Okay, I enjoyed it. It didn't blow me back in my chair this morning as I sat down and watched. It's not an episode that suddenly now I want to go and rewatch, which was different than when I went and watched The Mandalorian episode 1. And I'll get into more of that coming up here in a bit. And in terms of expectation, if this is the first time that you are experiencing My Nerd World, a Star Wars show and podcast, if you are a new viewer or a new listener, I really do gauge my enjoyment based off of how it makes me feel. What were my emotions during the content that I was watching or listening to or reading? and way less about the nitpicking. I don't like to nitpick. If there's something glaring, sure, but I like to keep it positive, okay? And I really do gauge my overall assessment of a particular piece of Star Wars content or any entertainment content by how it goes and makes me feel. So I walked away from episode 1 of the Book of Boba Fett, A Stranger in a Strange Land, and I walked away thinking, okay, I'm in. I mean, I was going to be in regardless, right? I'm going to be watching this no matter what. There was no doubt about that whatsoever. But I didn't, again, walk away going, I need to go and watch it immediately again. Now, I might later on today after I've had some distance from it. But compared to, and I'll go ahead and get to it, compared to episode 1 of The Mandalorian, episode 1 of The Mandalorian was much better in my opinion. And not just because it was the first Disney, live-action television show, or actually, let me rephrase, the first Star Wars live-action television show that we'd been able to watch. But it just was, in my opinion, a better opening episode. It had a lot. It had a better arc through it. The action was better. The tone was better, I thought. This felt low budget. Not in a bad way, but more in line with something like A New Hope. Okay. So let's go back to the very beginning of this. And first thing I did was when I clicked on it on the Disney Plus app, I went and looked to see what the runtime was, and I saw 38 minutes. And maybe that's a mistake. You kind of can't avoid it, right? It's right there. But you're curious, and I'm watching with my 15-year-old son, and I know he's going to ask me, how long is the episode? So I'm like, 38 minutes. All right. Okay, 38 minutes. What are they going to pack into this? Now, there were some rumors going into this episode, and I think those rumors are still going to play out, but I'll talk about that a little bit later on. In retrospect, before I dive into some details here, I would have liked it to be longer, but that being said, I also know that that's not up to me, right? Disney has a plan, and that's not what they're going for. This seems much more in line with the other television shows that they've done, that Disney and Lucasfilm have done. And it's going for that Saturday morning Flash Gordon serial vibe that George was inspired by. And I believe they used to go and show those, like on Saturday matinees. They used to throw up these half-hour, 20-minute episodes of Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers when you go out to like a matinee at a movie theater. Kind of like what Pixar does when they spike in a short animated feature before their major film, right? So clearly that's what the design of the show is going to be. I guess mentally sometimes I go into it thinking we're going to get something more along the lines of, say, like Game of Thrones, and that just isn't the case yet, right? Perhaps when we get to the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, it'll be more like that. But as of right now, it looks like they're going for, 40-minute episodes and more in line with what we got with the Mandalorian. I thought that the episode did a decent job of balancing. Well, actually, let me take that back. It did an okay job of balancing backstory and where the show is heading. And this is one of those moments where I kind of have to stop and go, hardcore fan versus casual fan. We got a lot of the backstory. We got the backstory of how Boba Fett got out of the Sarlacc pit, okay, in great detail. I could have, personally, had it been he got out, climbed out of the ground, and was, rescued by the Tusken Raiders, and then we move on. But clearly they want to establish more there. There's more story that they wanted to tell about the journey that Boba Fett had to take in order to bring himself to the point where he would meet up in that episode of Mandalorian season 2 to go and get his armor back. I wasn't expecting that. So I thought that with the dream sequences of when he was in the back-to-pod, if you want to call it that, I guess it's a tank, but it's a back-to-pod. Between the dream sequences of when he's in the back-to-pod tank and when we watch his quick rise to crime lord on Tatooine. I thought they did a decent job of balancing that out. I did feel it was a little thin on the action part of it. And that's where kind of the low budget comment came in. There wasn't any really massive ooh-ah moments. We had the monster moment, and I'll get to that. We did have the monster moment, which I could have done without, but again, I know that they're trying to tell a story here. I, as a hardcore fan, want to get past as quick as possible how he got out of the Sarlacc pit. And I want to get him to being Crime Lord, especially when you consider what we believe is coming down the road. And I won't spoil it again on the podcast, and I won't do it here on the YouTube show. But I will say that there's rumors going around that you're probably going to want to watch Solo before you watch any more of the Book of Boba Fett. And certainly they didn't give any indication necessarily so far of what I'm alluding to, apart from the bad guys that showed up towards the end of the episode. So again, I thought they did a decent job of balancing the backstory over where we're heading based off of the short period of time. Once he was out of the dream sequence, they really kind of, they got it moving. We're out of the back to tank. We got the suit on. We're heading to the streets. We're seeing what life is like in this particular city on Tatooine, and we're seeing how he's going to be different than Jabba the Hutt was. There were those, by the way, side note on this. I don't know if you caught it. There were these weird-looking four-legged robot things that were walking around. And for those that are familiar with those are Boston Dynamics robots. And they're clearly Boston Dynamics robots. They put some white shelling on them and some, like flaps to make them look different. But I don't know. I kind of feel like those are fairly well known. It was like the one thing that took me completely out of the moment. I'm like, those are Boston Dynamic robots. Why didn't you dress the legs differently? It seemed like and maybe it's not as common that people are aware that those are Boston Dynamics robots. Maybe that's not something that everybody's aware of. But the moment I saw them, I went, those are Boston Dynamics robots. Anyway, so I felt they did a good job once we got out of the dream sequences to sort of establish Boba Fett going around letting everybody know, hey, I'm the new crime lord in town. I enjoyed the sequence when they went into the bar and they met up with Jennifer Beals, who's playing a Twi'lek. I thought the exchanges of the customs in terms of polishing the helmets and do you want us to hose down your Gamorrean guards and feed them? I thought that was all interesting before we got to the one, there was a couple of different action sequences, don't misunderstand, but like the one main one where these bad guys show up. I thought they did a good job. So again, the setup was okay. You didn't have a ton of time to work within 38 minutes. And just in terms of sort of whiz bang, woo, I didn't really have a lot of that. What I did find was kind of weird. And this was the thing that I thought was I don't know. I don't want to say I was taken aback, but I was just like, oh, that was an odd choice. Is that they ended on a dream flashback without a cliffhanger. That seemed really odd to me. That seemed like a very odd choice, right? I just, that whole moment just seemed a little weird, that we ended on a flashback at a dream sequence, because we know he gets free from the Sand People. I mean, that's how we end up, meeting him in live action form, apart from the films in Mandalorian season 2. He's got the robes on, he's got the gaffy stick, heading into the episode where he goes and gets his armor back. So I thought that was a really weird choice. Almost like they had a longer episode that they shot and they decided, okay, we're going to cut episode 1 down into 2, which makes me kind of question whether or not they should have given us 2 episodes. It's Star Wars. People are going to come back and watch it. It'll be, and if they don't, right, if there's really, really casual fans who just check out the first episode, but then they don't go back to episode 2, I mean, Disney Plus will know that. Disney and Lucasfilm will know that. They'll have the numbers to be able to go and look at that. to see whether or not that was the case. As Star Wars fans, if you're just a straight up casual Star Wars fan or obviously a hardcore fan, we're all going to come back and watch again next week. But even when we went to sit down to watch, my son Kyle was like, "Hey, are we getting 2 episodes when the season starts off like we did with Hawkeye?" And I'm like, "No, I'm pretty sure that we're only getting 1 episode, and we only got 1 episode." But it felt like the place where they stopped it was like watching Dune, right? There's a whole other story here. Although Dune was 3.5 hours long, and this was only 38 minutes. So at the end of the day, I think I give the episode a B-. I'll go back and watch again and check it out probably later on today. Didn't blow me away. My expectations were kind of low, and it actually kind of met my expectations. Knowing what the leaks are out there about the potential of who might be involved in the story moving forward gets me a lot more excited, but we certainly didn't, again, get that in this episode. And I will say that I don't appreciate the fact that the commentary around the episode... Now, there may be an explanation for this, and it goes back to what I said a moment ago, but the commentary around the episode was that they were only showing the first 15 minutes of episode 1 because to show any more would spoil the show. Well, that was kind of true, but they could have shown anything from the episode and it wouldn't have spoiled anything. And as a matter of fact, there were scenes that I felt were further into the episode than 15 minutes. So, which again makes me believe that this may have been a longer episode that they cut into 2 to give us more episodes, And that'll probably be answered next week when we get into episode 2. If episode 2 sort of ends more traditionally on a cliffhanger or a resolution to what's going on, then I think we'll know the answer that this was an episode that they split up. One more thing before I wrap up this reaction is the monster. The monster, when the youngling Tusken Raider took them out to get water, we saw them go to a homestead, which I'm pretty sure wasn't the Lars homestead. I'm about 99% sure that wasn't the Lars homestead because they wanted them to show the water that was being stolen, so they needed them to dig up the little water pods or whatever. Okay, so we get this creature that pops up out of the ground that's straight up out of Ray Harryhausen. For those of a certain age familiar with the special effects master from back in the day, that monster, the moment it popped up out of the sand, I was like, oh my gosh, that could be a stop-motion Ray Harryhausen monster. And my next thought was that's straight up Robert Rodriguez. As a hardcore fan who's about my age, I could see how he wanted to add something to it as like an homage to the master Ray Harryhausen. It did seem a little weird for Tatooine, seeing this creature that we hadn't seen before. I thought at first maybe it was a baby, crate dragon. I was a little bit surprised by it. And some of the choices, I could have ditched that scene, right? And I understand the establishment of what they needed to do there. He needed to defeat that to the Tusken Raiders, probably in order to bring about his freedom, I'm going to assume, right? The dynamic of all that seemed weird. Seeing the different Tusken Raiders outfit, the different Tusken Raider outfits seemed a little weird too. Suddenly they took on this this vibe that we got from Enfys Nest and Solo from that crew. The way they were different, and I don't know if I liked it or not. I really kind of enjoyed. I like what they did with the Tusken Raiders in Mandalorian season in the Mandalorian. They gave a little bit more humanity to them, but this kind of took it to another level, and I'm not sure how I feel about that, and especially with the dress because their outfits seemed more refined than we'd ever seen before. But I could have taken that whole thing and ditched it to get more background and backstory on the crime lord element. But I don't like to do, even though I have, that coulda, woulda, shouldas, what if I would have done? No, I'm not writing the show. I'm just a fan who's watching the show. So again, I give it a solid B-. and we'll see what they have in store for next week. Speaking of in store, another episode is coming up on Saturday for My Nerd World, a Star Wars podcast and show, and some interesting leaks came out. Fantha Tracks is reporting that there's an unknown Star Wars project being filmed right now at Pinewood Studios, and so I'll share some thoughts on that. Further thoughts on Boba Fett, the Book of Boba Fett, Episode 1, and your listener feedback. So drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment up on YouTube. And remember, if you want to support My Nerd World, you can always go and pick up a copy of my science fiction space opera series, EMBARK. Great for ages 11 and up, written for adults, very much in the style of Star Wars, but also enjoyed by as young as 11-year-olds. There's a link on the banner on the YouTube page. Be sure you subscribe and hit the alert button on YouTube. Or you can go to mynerdworld.net. 6 books in the series available right now in ebook, paperback, hardback, and audiobook. Book 7 is being written. I'm actually going to start working on it as soon as I wrap up the show here. So go and check it out. If you like space opera, if you like Star Wars, if you like science fiction, and you are a reader or you know a reader, that's how you can go and support the show. You can pick up book 1 in ebook for just 99 cents right now, and you can get the opening trilogy, EMBARK Book 1, Treasure in Darkness, and The Vanishing War, which completes a trilogy before we get on to the next story in Gahan Corbijn and the Asteroid of Misfortune. You can actually pick up all 3, the trilogy, for just $3.99, which is a big discount from buying all of the ebooks separately. So you can get the trilogy for EMBARK for just $3.99 in ebook as well. All right. This went longer than I expected. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did recording it, and I will talk to you again in just a few days. Have yourself a great one, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts on how you felt about the Book of Boba Fett, Episode 1. Bye.
The Force will be with you. Always.
My Nerd World.